Hi guys, welcome to another Q&A. Thanks for sending in your wonderful, thought-provoking questions. I'm going to dive right into answering them, but before I do, just to let you know that there will be timestamps in the description so that you can navigate with ease what will doubtlessly be a lengthy ramble on my part. Let's get into it. In response to my humor video, thanks for your kind response to that, by the way, everyone. Albert Davis sends me this question: do you find anti-humor to be funny? Which is a great question. Seemingly a simple yes or no question, but I think it does raise the question of what is anti-humor. And if you look up anti-humor, you'll get, for me, I find that the definition and the examples that are typically used with the definition don't really match up. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you look on Wikipedia or whatever site, and it'll say, anti-humor is, basically funny because it's not funny. Or usually they'll say humor that avoids a traditional setup punchline structure, and that produces laughter because the audience expects a traditional joke structure and their expectations are subverted, resulting in laughter. And this definitely matches up with my discussion of humor in my video. But then they'll include examples, and I always feel like the examples are not good examples. So, for example, I saw this example from Stephen Fry on QI. Your mama's so fat, she could usefully have a calorie-controlled diet and regular exercise. Or there's this joke that I'm going to include from one of my favorite comedians, Bill Bailey, who does an entire line in variations of the three blokes walk into a pub jokes.
Three blind mice go into a pub, but they are unaware of their surroundings, so to derive humour from it would be exploitative.
Now, I wouldn't call that anti-humor, because in my opinion, that is a punchline. It's just not a traditional punchline. It's a meta punchline. The joke is about the joke itself. So the joke is, this is how jokes work, and then that is subverted. So I'm not sure I would describe that as anti-humor, because it is the setup, and then the punchline is responding to the setup. But the punchline is sort of stepping outside of the joke and commenting on humor. So I would call that meta-humor. I wouldn't call it anti-humor. To me, anti-humor is a very specific, you came here for humor, and I'm not giving it to you. And I think like Norm McDonald is a very good example of this. A Nerdwriter did a really good video essay about Norm MacDonald's brand of humor, and you should check it out, and I'll put the link in the description. If you haven't seen it, if you watch my channel, I'm sure you watch Nerdwriter. He does what I do, but better. Tig Notaro is another good example of this. I mean, she doesn't, it's not exclusively anti-humor, but a lot of what she does is anti-humor. Like, she has this wonderful routine where she just pushes a stool around on stage for a really long time, and eventually just the lack of anything happening itself becomes really funny. So do I find that funny? No, because by definition it's not. Do I enjoy it? Sometimes. I think it depends on the performer. I think it really depends on the delivery. Because the humor isn't in the content, it has so much to do with the performer and the delivery and how they sell it. I'm not a huge fan of Norm MacDonald, although I do sort of appreciate what he does, but he doesn't thrill me as an entertainer. I like Tig Notaro a lot. I think it really just depends on how you personally respond to the performer. So yes, that is my long-winded answer to your yes or no question. Do I find anti-humor to be funny? No, but yes. I find meta-humor to be very funny. I really enjoy meta-humor. I really enjoy meta everything. I mean, I was a film student, so of course I like everything meta. Duran Rivera, you sent me not so much a question as an anecdote about your cousin who had an asthma attack and was put in an ambulance, and then the ambulance hit a school bus. And I have to admit, I did chuckle at that image. It did make me laugh. I'm a terrible person. But as soon as you mentioned that your cousin went into a coma, I stopped laughing. That's very serious. And I'm glad he's okay. And that he lived. I'm glad that your cousin didn't die. That makes me feel better about laughing about, yeah, there is something funny about the image of an ambulance hitting a school bus. I don't know. Yeah. And maybe I lack the proper empathy to be as suitably horrified by that as I should be. Marinela Samourkas, God bless you, you asked me possibly the best question that I could have gotten, which is, what is your favorite movie and why? I sorted through a lot of movies in my head as soon as I saw that. I said, well, I love this movie, I love this movie. And I kept coming up with a lot of, speaking of meta humor, meta movies, movies about movies, movies like Inglourious Bastards, or movies like What We Do in the Shadows, movies where the film itself is a response to previous films. And I said, okay, well, putting that aside, because obviously I love those films because of the ideas and the way they make me think. But putting that aside and just thinking of film as a medium in and of itself and what it can achieve, just a film that plays things straight. I have to say, Lawrence of Arabia. I know some of you are probably rolling your eyes. It's one of those films that, a lot of old white men sort of list among their favorites. You get Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese going on about how Lawrence of Arabia is the greatest film ever. Some of you may not have seen it. It is about 4 weeks long. It's on the long side. It's an epic film. And to me, it is just, it's the ultimate film. It's so cinematic. It really, to me, the images in that film are so deeply ingrained in me. And I think that one of the reasons that, obviously, when you have a favorite film or a film that really speaks to you, it has to do with your personality and it has to do with what you like. I love very character-centric films. I love films that have really good dialogue and really good sort of poetic screenplays. I love movies about war. I don't love movies about romance, and this film has none of that, at least not on the surface. Yeah, I'm very American in that way. No sex, please, just violence. Just violence, please, think of the children. But I also think that the films that really stay with you have a lot to do with timing and about when you see them, and that you saw them at just the right time for them to make an impact and to stay with you. I saw Lawrence of Arabia when I was maybe 9, possibly 10, but I think 9, which was too young because I didn't understand it. I had absolutely no intellectual context for the ideas that were being talked about, for the plot, for the politics, for the history. It's interesting that there's a motorcycle going by just as I'm talking about Lawrence of Arabia. If you've seen it, you'll know why I say that. But, I remember walking in on my dad and my brother watching it. They had decided not to include me because it was a guy movie and apparently not for me, which is ironic because it went on to be one of my favorite films of all time and hugely influential for me in my study of cinema. And it was this scene. I'm going to put it up so you can see it. I remember so vividly just watching from where I was standing and having no context. I didn't know what the film was. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know who any of the characters were or what was the backstory for this scene. And I didn't have to know. I was completely sucked into it. Just the images, the music, the emotion that was coming through. That nothing needed to be said or explained. When I watch this movie, I'm very reminded of early silent cinema because of the emphasis on spectacle and emotion, the emotion that comes through the spectacle and the visuals. That there's very little need to understand what's going on, which is ironic because it's a beautiful and intelligent very well-crafted screenplay. But to think that the way that it is directed is so purely cinematic that even just a child of 9 can walk in and see it and understand on an emotional level what's going on, without understanding on an intellectual level. Another scene that illustrates that for me is the scene in the Turkish prison, which is a really dark scene, and it's a scene where it's heavily implied, and as we know from Lawrence's autobiography, that he was gang raped, and this was a hugely traumatic and life-changing incident for him, obviously. You know, I saw this as a child. I had no idea what was going on. I don't even know if I knew what rape was at that point. But I remember the feeling of wrongness, and something so wrong and so bad is going on. And I just remember the close-ups of Lawrence's eyes and the Turkish Bey's lips and the guy leering at him while he pulls him down on the bench. And watching it, you know, 10, 15, almost 20 years later, with the full understanding of what's happening and what's being implied, and having the exact same emotional reaction to it as when I didn't know what was going on. Because because the emotions and the emotion behind the scene was so purely conveyed in the visuals. It's a really powerful film. And like I say, also it's an amazing screenplay. The literature student in me just adores some of those lines. Are amazing, and the structure is beautiful. It's a 2-part structure, you know, with an intermission in between. You know, DVD 1 and DVD 2, as I discovered it, which makes a lot of sense because, you know, it's a 2-part protagonist. You know, Lawrence himself is divided into 2 parts, and it starts with his death and goes back to try and figure out who the hell this guy was. And we don't get a clear answer because he himself doesn't know. It's actually about a guy who becomes almost less and less of a person as the film goes on. You know, it's one of the strangest, most atypical, most sort of unmanly heroes I've ever seen in a film. Of course, Lawrence is supposed to be gay, and this was actually deliberately hinted at by the writers in his relationship with Ollie. But not just that, just the fact that he is so odd and naive and masochistic and self-destructive and egotistical, yes, but also like that he's a black sheep and an outsider, and he identifies as an outsider, and he has dreams of glory, but the more closer he gets to it, the less he can handle it, the more he loses himself, and he gets caught up in this fantasy of being able to change the world, and that he's gonna free the Arabs and lead them to glory. And we get caught up in that too, especially in the first part of the film. And then by the end, we see how delusional this is, and how he's just this cog in a machine. And it ends with this shot of him behind the glass that you can't even see his face, just indicating how much he has been destroyed over the course of this up and down story structure, which is just so beautiful. Tragic. Utterly tragic, you know, really heavy, too heavy for a 9-year-old. But watch it. If you haven't seen it, watch it. You know, if you can sit through 15 hours of Lord of the Rings, you can definitely sit through 4 hours of Lawrence of Arabia. You know, and like I say, I have a very short attention span, and you know, I know this film sometimes gets described as boring because it's 4 hours long. I am never bored by it. I've seen it a dozen times. And I always get so sucked into the emotion, into the drama, and into just the beauty of what's going on. So yeah, that was my ramble about Lawrence of Arabia. I always want to do a video essay about Lawrence of Arabia, but I never have anything to say that's new. I could make a video essay that's just, this is why I think it's great. But, you know, people have already made that, and I feel like I don't have anything really new and revealing about it, apart from just, God, it's an amazing movie. It's just, to me, it's like as close to perfect as a film can get. Of course it has its flaws, and there's some brown face and some awkward things in it, but it's just pure this pure expression of what cinema as a medium can do. And God, I really want to go to the desert now. Just want to go to the desert and see it and ride a camel. Take Me to Your Cinema sent me a really good question about Truffaut. You were watching my my video on war movies, Spielberg versus Tarantino. And you asked me about Truffaut's famous statement that there is no such thing as an anti-war film. And for those of you who aren't familiar, I'll actually read the question as sent because you phrased it so well. You phrased it better than I could. You wrote, the idea is, all war films, regardless of their purported philosophical position, glamorize war simply by virtue of depicting it. And that to frame war as tragic, as many anti-war films seem to do, nonetheless ennobles it in a way that undermines any genuine opposition to it. And then you asked what were my thoughts on this, given that it's an argument that relies so heavily on ideas of framing and representation. I think one of the problems with not just war movies, but cinema in general, is this inclination, this natural inclination to make things beautiful. This is actually something, I mean, visually beautiful, if not emotionally beautiful. Even Lawrence of Arabia, which, like I say, is such a tragedy. Even, you know, the awful scenes are beautifully visually presented. And this is considered to be a sign of good filmmaking, that it's nice to look at, as makes sense. This is something that came up when I was writing, actually, my essay on The Age of Innocence, which started as just a look at historical films and nostalgia. And I talked a bit about merchant ivory films and about this problem in merchant ivory films, which is that even when the material is really political, it's funny how merchant ivory films have a reputation for being kind of nostalgic fluff. Whereas when you look at a film like Howard's End, which is actually one of my favorite films and favorite books of all time, or Morris, or The Remains of the Day, or even a room with a View, although, you know, being one of the early films, it doesn't achieve it quite as well. The material is really critical of the society that the film is set in. There's a lot of political critique. But that sort of gets lost because the visuals are so beautiful. You know, you look at the time period and you see the costumes and you see the gorgeous rolling hills of Edwardian England or wherever, and it's so inviting and so sumptuous. And I think that sort of overrides the political point that is being made, you know, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And it's like a tourism advert, like, come, oh, Victorian England was amazing. Look how gorgeous everything was. You know, and also people were starving and the upper classes were terrible. You know, like there's, and I don't think that just applies to merchant ivory films. I think this is a problem with all historical films. I think this is a problem with cinema generally. That it's very often films will get into a position where they're criticizing something, but because, you know, the filmmakers are making a film that's supposed to entertain and is supposed to be at least visually beautiful, that there is a little element of contradiction that allows people to interpret the opposite thing. So, you know, people will watch, you know, soldiers will watch Apocalypse Now and get really caught up in the massacre scenes because they're filmed in such an exciting and beautiful way, even though it is an anti-war movie. Or American History X, famously, you know, even though it's about how terrible neo-Nazis are, neo-Nazis watch clips from the movie, and you can go on YouTube and find people who have posted clips, and it says, you know, yes, awesome, we should go and attack people and beat people up, because the way that it's shot in the film is so beautiful and exciting, out of context. And of course, it wouldn't be, I have to talk about Fight Club. I have to break the rule of Fight Club and talk about Fight Club, you know, because in my discussion of my talk at Duran, Vulcans versus Nazis, I talk about how Fight Club inspired fight clubs. and people watch it and get really caught up in this view of masculinity that's being presented, which I don't think is at all the argument of the film, and is certainly not the argument of the book. And Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote the book, is I think is gay. And certainly, if you read the book, you see that there is a very dry and ironic critique of traditional masculinity. But would we like Tyler Durden as much if he wasn't played by Brad Pitt, if he wasn't beautiful and charismatic? Of course, you couldn't change that, because so much of the character is that he is beautiful and charismatic and seductive in that way. But if you're reading a book, you can know that, and you can understand that that's part of his magic and his pull, but you can also forget it long enough to actually look at what he's doing and what he's saying, and to hopefully be a little repulsed by it. But in a movie where the visuals come first and the ideas come second, and I think that is true, and I think the fact that I just described Lawrence of Arabia in the way that I did, that yeah, the visuals come first, and if the visuals are not in line with what the filmmaker is trying to convey, what do you do? How do you get around that? And in film studies, we do end up watching a lot of films that are deliberately ugly, or that are deliberately boring, or are just really hard to watch, because the filmmakers are trying to get around this and are trying to make a point about, violence is bad, so we'll present it in a way that is actually genuinely really hard to watch. Funny Games springs to mind. Really, really hard film to watch. Or Salo, or, one of those films that's so excruciating to watch, you sort of subject yourself to it, just intellectually, like to make yourself a better person, almost. But outside of film studies circles, people don't go to watch those films because we're not masochists. We go to the cinema to be entertained. So it's not a really good strategy in the long term. Another strategy that I find interesting is one that Scorsese uses, actually, which is to exhaust the viewer. And I noticed this in The Age of Innocence, which is about 2 hours and 20 minutes. The first time I saw The Age of Innocence, I started watching and I thought, wow, it's so beautiful. Gosh, the Victorian era was gorgeous. Look at the detail, look at the costumes. And after, 2.5 hours of that, every scene so densely packed with stuff, by the end I was exhausted. I was emotionally exhausted because the brain could only process so much. And I remember walking out of that film and walking out onto the street and a drab gray London street and thinking, this is amazing. This is amazing. People are wearing sneakers and jeans, and people can eat with whatever fork they want, and they can get divorced, and they can do what they want without facing social ostracism. And it was like being able to breathe again after the suffocation of so much visual stimulus. And I think actually The Wolf of Wall Street also did this, arguably. I know a lot of people were sort of mad at The Wolf of Wall Street for seemingly glorifying what it was condemning. But then other people argued, well, no, the point is that it is so exhausting to watch that even if you start feeling very excited about what's being shown, after a while you get sick of it. It's almost like eating too much cake. By the end you're just, this is too much. I never want to eat cake again. Which is, it just starts to feel a bit queasy and repulsive. And I think that's an interesting tactic. I don't know what else is out there, but it does seem to be a problem that is sort of at the heart of cinema as a visual medium. You don't want to make your films deliberately ugly, but at the same time you don't want to glorify what you're showing. And I do think that a lot of it has to do with interpretation. I don't think anyone who isn't a neo-Nazi will watch American History X and want to go out and attack immigrants. I think you do sort of have to bring your own mindset to the film and see how you interpret it does have to do with what you already believe and what you already think you're going to see. David Einhorn, you asked me about where do I think that the industry is going, which is a big question. You talked about following the money, pandering to Chinese audiences. You asked me about Netflix and streaming. Definitely, I think it has to do with the kind of circles you're in. When I was working for a chain of independent cinemas, and I was going, and I had free movie tickets and was going once, twice a week at least. I remember being very excited and stimulated by the quality of film that I was seeing. But now that I'm sort of on the outside and I'm just going to mainstream films with my friends who aren't particularly movie buffs, I'll often come away from it just being like, oh, really? This is what's being made now? A lot of glossy blockbusters. And I can understand why things like Netflix and streaming make it much easier for people to find their niche without, that you don't have to actually work for a cinema company and have those tickets and be in that literal physical environment, because you can find it online. You can seek out media that appeals to your tastes that maybe isn't broad enough to be made into the newest blockbuster movie, but nonetheless is interesting. And I think that that's exciting. I'm not one of those film people who thinks that film is the be-all, end-all of all media. I really like, long-form storytelling if it's used appropriately and if it's right for the story. I don't like dragging things out longer than they need to be. But in terms of the cinema itself, I do have sort of an odd complaint, and probably in response to the point that I just made. I do feel like films are too beautiful these days. Maybe beautiful is the wrong term. Too glossy, too shiny and sleek and visually impressive, to the point that almost the ideas and the characters don't have a chance to shine through, the CGI and just the look how stunning. A film that springs to mind is A Wrinkle in Time. That one stuck with me particularly just because I read the book as a child and I really loved it. And I think that movie really would have lent itself well to I really think it would have done better with a lower budget. I know that's a weird thing to say. But it's a film that's so much about ideas, or a story, sorry, I should say. A book is it's so high concept. It really lends it. I feel like if it had crappy cardboard sets, I feel like it would have been better, because the characters and the ideas, which is the real focus, would have shone through. Maybe I'm just naturally suspicious of too much beauty, but I do see it as a little bit of a talking down to the audience of, look, shiny. Where I feel like you can do things that are interesting visually without them having to be just uniformly sleek and gorgeous. And I feel like this also has to do with the miniseries thing that I was talking about, the long-form storytelling. Another film that springs to mind that came out a few years ago that was terrible was Ender's Game. Loved the book again as a kid, and I was watching it and I was thinking that should have been a miniseries, a short miniseries of like 5 episodes. Just because the structure, like a low budget, almost deliberately ugly, kind of bleak, utilitarian looking miniseries would have been much better suited to let the drama and the characters of that particular story shine through. I don't think that gloss and beauty and CGI is something that you can apply equally well to all stories. It's too uniform. You talk about pandering to international audiences, and I think you're right, but I think it's not just that. I mean, Mad Max Fury Road, springs to mind as a film that is stunning visually. A lot of CGI, a lot of effects. Very little dialogue. In fact, the dialogue is basically unnecessary. I think it was specifically written with the idea that you could show this in China without subtitles and everybody would still be able to understand perfectly what was happening. And yet it's a really good movie because of the way that it's structured, because of the way that it's filmed. That, beauty is not a solution. It's not a patch for shoddy filmmaking. You know, you can't throw money at a movie and expect it to work out. It is an art form. It's not, you know, a formula that you can crack with a marketing team and just throw a bunch of money at. But maybe, yeah. And again, this comes down to the conflict between film as an art and film as a business. And I don't know how that could change unless our entire economy changes, which is a little sad. But, you know, I feel like this conflict has been going on probably since the beginning of cinema, or at least since The Miracle Decision. It's a bit of film history for you. Now, I'm trying to remember who wrote this. Oh no, this is still David Einhorn. You also asked me, where do I see myself taking this channel? Good question. I was actually just talking to Duran online about this, about why I wasn't marketing or pushing my channel as much as maybe I could. And it's partly just because I don't know even where I'm going to be in a few months. I'm studying. I'm still not sure which programs I'm gonna get into, and if so, what kind of work I'll be doing at the same time. So I'm a little reluctant at the moment to commit myself to you know, a vision for the channel for the future, you know, a 5-year plan. What I would like to do is improve the production quality of my videos. I'm okay with computers, but I'm not amazing at them. And it is really frustrating because I have good equipment. I have a good microphone. I have Final Cut Pro. I have the stuff that I need, you know, but it is frustrating that I will sort of shut myself in my closet for, you know, 2 hours to record, you know, a voiceover with my excellent microphone and you know, to muffle all outside noises and try to get it right and try to filter it properly. And of course, inevitably I'll put it up and somebody will say, the audio sucks. It's not right. It's too low. And I don't know what to do at that point. You know, I'm just not an expert. And it would take, I want to improve it, but of course writing and editing the videos takes so much time that I almost don't want to, you know, wait another couple of days to try and really figure out, you know, the technicality of how to get this exactly right. So I'm thinking when I get back to London, hopefully I will find someone who can help me with that. It would be nice to have a collaborator. And, you know, I have a friend from college who I've been pestering for a while about maybe doing a podcast or even just a few episodes where we could chat about films, because I feel like we always have a lot to say, and I think it would be a nice change from the usual scripted format. But of course she has her own life. She's a full-time medical student. So it is, yeah. I have to say, starting this channel, I have such a whole new respect for YouTubers, and I understand that it really is a full-time job if you want to get videos out regularly. So we'll see. I am very much a we'll see how it goes kind of person, and I know that there are people who like to know where things are going now, and for those people like me who are like, no, we'll wait and see, are just the worst, and you hate us, but we'll see how it goes. Finally, Domenica K wants to know what I'm going to talk about next. Good question. And I can tell you now that the video that I've started to work on is about it's about Lord of the Rings. Yes, I'm going there. I was rewatching Return of the King, and I suddenly felt like I feel like there's a lot of really deep ideas here that I want to talk about. And my working title is Life Lessons from Lord of the Rings. And I don't, like I said, I've just started it and I don't want to give too much away. You know, remember the Age of Innocence video started as something completely different, and I'd love to go back and do that one. Again, that essay on Merchant Ivory films, because I feel like there's a whole bunch of stuff that I wrote that I didn't get a chance to talk about. But yeah, Lord of the Rings, because it'll piss off my mother. Just kidding. I love my mother. She's so supportive, and I just keep making videos about films that she hasn't seen. And now I'm going to make one about a film that she hasn't seen that's about 15 hours long. And that's fantasy, a genre that she hates. And she's going to try to watch it to be supportive, and she's going to clock out at about 2 hours and 10 minutes. Just like, why can't you do a film that I've seen and that I love? But yeah, I'm really excited to do it. It's you know, another wonderful sweeping epic like Lawrence of Arabia, but longer. And yeah, I'm excited to get to talk about it finally, because I feel like these ideas have been going on for a while. Before I sign off, I have questions for you. I have 2 questions that I would love it if you would respond to. The first question is, does the Q&A format work for you? Now that I've done 2, I ask because when I asked you to send questions, you didn't immediately send questions, and then I sent a response, and you sent some great questions. Thank you. But I thought maybe you don't have a lot of interest and you would like something else. I love doing the Q&As because it gives me a chance to talk directly to you and to talk about what you're interested in and sort of feel like I'm having a little bit of a conversation. But maybe you would like a different structure. Maybe you would like a live chat, or maybe you just want behind-the-scenes footage. Or let me know. I'm very flexible. This is for you, and this is for so that we sort of get a chance to get acquainted. And if you have any other ideas, I am very much open to input. You know, I want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth, so to speak. And the other question that I have to ask is, what are your favorite films and why? Or just what are your favorite films if you don't have time to write an essay. But I would love to hear. I feel like you can learn so much about someone from the films that they love, and it'd be great inspiration for me to see what you guys care about and what you're excited about and what sparks your imagination. So if you're feeling chatty, please comment below, or comment in the Patreon post, or just send me a message and let me know. I love hearing from you guys, and it really gives me a chance to feel like I'm interacting with my audience. Again, thank you so much for your support. I can't tell you how much it means to me, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.